Hello, my name is Eleanor, and this is the story of my romance with Javier. I'm 58 years old, or as I prefer to say, I've survived 58 springs with a touch of elegance, a few scars, and a heart that, despite everything, still beats with curiosity. After I retired, I realized that time, once so scarce, had suddenly become abundant. I found myself walking through this large, quiet house, the same one where I raised my 2 children, now scattered across the world with families and journeys of their own. It was on one of those long Sundays, somewhere between a cup of coffee and the rerun of an old movie, that I caught myself staring out at the porch and wondering, could this house be more than just a silent shelter? That's how the idea of turning my home into a small guest house was born, not with much fanfare, but with a deep desire to feel useful, alive, maybe even accompanied. I wasn't thinking about love, not at all. I had already lived my loves, some sweet, others stormy. I no longer expected sweeping passions. I just wanted people around, new stories, voices, echoing through hallways that had grown far too quiet. I wanted movement, and maybe, deep down, a bit of myself back. I started slowly. I renovated 2 rooms, changed the curtains, bought new towels, and learned to make banana pancakes with honey that, according to my first guess, were better than those in fancy hotels. I hosted couples on delayed honeymoons, adventurous older women, even a writer who spent 3 days just observing the birds in my backyard. Each guest left a bit of themselves behind, and I offered more than a clean bed. I offered listening, strong coffee, and a sunny porch to sit and talk. "Miss Eleanor, you have a way of welcoming even silence," a guest once told me. That touched me deeply, because in truth, I was also learning to welcome my own silence. Over time, I found a new rhythm. I baked fresh bread in the mornings, made the beds with care, and decorated the vases in the living room with flowers from my garden. I even started listening to music while cleaning the kitchen, something I hadn't done since the 90s. Still, there were nights when I'd sit alone with a glass of wine and feel that familiar ache in my chest. Not sadness, but absence. A kind of absence that's hard to name, as if something were still missing, even though I couldn't quite say what. But I didn't complain. There was something beautiful about rebuilding a routine with my own hands. I was slowly reinventing myself, with no rush, like someone stitching together a quilt from the scraps of a life. What I didn't know was that, somewhere between one reservation and the next, between one breakfast and another check-in, love could still knock at my door. He arrived on a warm Tuesday afternoon, with a small suitcase and a gentle smile that said more than words. "Good afternoon, I'm Javier. I made a reservation through the app," he said, in a soft voice that blended Spanish and poetry. I smiled back, as I always did with guests, but something inside me stirred differently. It was as if that voice had struck a long-forgotten chord within me. "Welcome, Javier. The house is simple, but made with care," I said, handing him the key to the room with a garden view. He thanked me with a nod, and a gaze that wasn't intrusive, just attentive. Observant, I thought. I like people who notice things. During check-in, I noticed the little details. The light linen shirt, the well-kept shoes, the steady hands. He seemed at ease in his own silence. He didn't force conversation or show impatience. He simply walked through the house slowly, like someone who respects the space of those who came before him. That evening, he left a note in the kitchen. "The room is perfect. Thank you for the warm welcome, Javier." It wasn't common for a guest to leave notes. That simple gesture brought an unexpected smile to my face. The next morning, as I was making coffee, I heard soft footsteps on the porch. It was him. He sat down without hurry, eyes gently watching the garden. "Do you grow these lavenders yourself?" he asked. "Yes, ever since my grandchildren were born. They say it soothes the heart," I replied. He laughed gently and said, "Then this garden must be a balm for a lot of people." I noticed that Javier didn't talk much, but when he did, every word had its place, and maybe that's why he listened better than most. While other guests usually spoke more about themselves, he wanted to know about me, about the house, the town, the smells coming from the kitchen, and why. "Did you turn your home into a guest house?" he asked, looking straight into my eyes, not in any rush to look away. It took me a moment to answer. Because silence is beautiful, but sometimes it weighs too much. I wanted life around here again, even if only for a few days. now and then. He nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. And in that instant, I felt something strange. Not a shiver, but a presence, as if my soul had straightened its shoulders to listen more closely. Javier was discreet, but there was a tenderness in him that threw me off balance. On the second day, I noticed he washed his own mug and left it on the drying rack with the towel neatly folded beside it. On the third, he brought in the porch cushions before the rain came. No one did that. No one. And that's when I realized he didn't just take up space. He belonged. Even as a passerby, there was something in him that wasn't passing. And without me even noticing, that unusual guest had already opened a door. Inside me that I didn't even know was still there. A door between welcoming and being welcomed. I don't know exactly when I stopped seeing Javier as just a guest. Maybe it was that morning when he offered to set the breakfast table, and I realized I'd been looking forward to seeing him without even admitting it. He had a way of arriving that didn't interrupt. He completed the space. The kitchen, once quiet, began to fill with a new sound. The sound of two voices meeting between the aroma of coffee and the scent of bread in the oven. "Are you always up this early?" I asked as he dried one of the cups. "Just early enough to catch the day starting off calm," he replied with a smile. That was the kind of conversation we had. Simple, but full of unspoken meaning. Nothing felt forced. We talked with a kind of ease, like it was already a habit, even though everything was still so new. Before I go on with this story, take a second to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps. Stories like this, about love blooming later in life, reach more hearts, maybe even yours. After all, everyone deserves to be reminded that love can begin again, even after 60. On the second day, we had lunch together. By chance, he stuck around longer than he'd planned, and when I asked if he wanted to join me, he simply said, "I'd be delighted. Your food smells like home." That compliment made me blush. I, who thought I had forgotten what it felt like to be noticed, found myself fixing my hair before opening the oven. We talked about everything: music, cities, childhood, recipes, and when he laughed at my stories, his eyes would narrow just slightly, like someone savoring something good. "You remind me of someone I cared for deeply," he said once. I don't know who. Maybe someone I haven't truly met yet. I didn't know how to respond. I just smiled, my heart beating a little faster. That same evening, the power went out for a few minutes, something that happens often around here. I lit candles around the living room and on the porch. I was making soup for myself, and without overthinking it, I asked, "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? That way the soup goes further and silence becomes company." He accepted, and we sat down at the table, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows on the walls. It was a simple dinner, but there was something about that moment that felt like a scene from a movie. The way he looked at me, how attentively he listened as I talked about my father, my longing, those heavy feelings Sunday afternoons. "You speak beautifully about the saddest things," he said, passing me the bread. I laughed and teased. We learn how to polish our pain over time. We both laughed, an open, easy laugh, the kind that makes you forget your wrinkles, your losses, your fears. It was the laughter of two mature souls who had found each other in the kitchen of a small guest house, with hot soup, fresh bread, and a quiet tenderness blooming between the words. That night didn't end with grand declarations. It ended with him saying, "Thank you for today, Eleanor. It was special." And I simply replied, "It really was, Javier. Much more than I expected." I fell asleep with my soul dancing, as if I'd rediscovered the lightness of being seen and cherished again. On another night, I had set out 2 chairs on the porch, as I used to do when I wanted to sit and think in silence. Javier was in his room, and I, for some reason, hesitated to turn off the lights in the house. Something in me didn't want the day to end just yet. I heard the soft creak of a door, and when I turned around, there he was, sleeves rolled up, a glass of wine in hand, and that calm gaze of his that always seemed to read me before I spoke. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, motioning toward the chair beside me. I nodded with a smile and tapped the wooden armrest lightly, as if to say, "This seat was already yours." He sat down slowly. We stayed there for a few minutes, just listening to the sounds of the night, the crickets, the rustling leaves, the faint chime of a wind bell I'd forgotten in the back of the yard. It was he who broke the silence, his voice low. "Nights like this smell like memory, don't they?" I answered without looking directly at him. "They do, of everything that's been, and everything still waiting to be. There was a calm between us, nothing urgent, no rush, but there was also a quiet electricity, the kind that doesn't make noise but burns slow and deep. He ran his fingers along the arm of the chair, and then gently rested his fingertips on my hand. He didn't hold it, just touched it, and in that subtle gesture, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a very long time. I looked at him, and our eyes met in a way that didn't need any words. It was as if they were saying, "I'm here, and I see you." Not in haste, not with promises, just with truth. The entire world went silent on that porch, and what remained was an intimate space between two souls that recognized each other. He leaned in slightly, like someone asking for permission with his eyes, and I, for the first time in many years, didn't pull away. I closed my eyes slowly, and when I felt his lips touch mine, it was like breathing again after a long time underwater. The kiss wasn't rushed, it was slow, respectful, yet full of mature, wholehearted desire. A kiss that understood the value of time, of loss, and the courage it takes to open up again. When we pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "You taste like a new beginning." And I replied with a shy smile, "And you, like something good I thought I'd never live again." We sat there for a long while, hands gently clasped, looking out into the dark, as if we could see the future. And in that moment, I understood. Passion in maturity doesn't shout. It whispers truths that only time can teach. It's not about promises, it's about presence. And that
Everything.
night, silence said. After that kiss on the porch, the world seemed to breathe differently. Nothing had changed outside, but inside me, a door had swung wide open, one I didn't even remember locking. I went to sleep with my body warm, and my heart wrapped in a silence full of meaning. The next morning, we tried to act as if everything was the same. He had breakfast as usual, complimented the bread I'd baked, and even made a comment about the sky looking like it held both rain and longing. I smiled, only we knew what that sky meant. Later that day, he went for a walk around town, and I tended to the guest house with my mind far away. With every step I took, something inside me kept asking if this was really happening, if this feeling had truly been born so quickly. Or maybe he was only revealing something that had lived inside me all along, just waiting to be awakened. That night, we sat again on the porch, though for less time. Javier seemed restless, his eyes alert, as if searching for the right words to say something that didn't quite fit into ready-made sentences. I felt it too, an energy in the air that couldn't be translated into small talk, until he looked at me with that rare combination of steadiness and gentleness, something only he seemed to know how to do, and said, "Eleanor, may I sleep with you tonight?" My heart gave a small, deep leap. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the answer was already within me, even before the question was spoken. I just had to walk through the fears that had been keeping me safe for years. I took a deep breath, and then, instead of speaking, I gave my answer with a kiss. But not just any kiss. It was deeper, more conscious, more mine. A kiss that said yes, but also said I trust you. He understood, his arms wrapped around me with care, like someone holding something precious, not out of fear of breaking it, but out of reverence for its worth. As we walked together to my room, the floor beneath my feet felt new, not because of where we stepped, but because of where we were choosing to go. Lying next to someone after so many years is like relearning how to breathe in unison. There was shyness, of course, but there was also surrender, light touches, long glances, whispered words that carried more truth than many grand declarations. "You're beautiful," he said, tracing the lines on my face with his fingers. "These wrinkles tell stories I'd love to hear, one by one." I closed my eyes and let the moment hold me. For the first time in a long while, I didn't worry about the lights being on, about the mirror, about a body that no longer looked the same, because there, in that bed, with Javier beside me, I felt whole, and I understood that allowing yourself to live something new, even when life seems to have already told its best chapters, is perhaps the most beautiful way to rewrite your ending. The sun rose slowly that morning, as if it knew the day deserved tenderness. The light slipped through my bedroom curtains with a softness that touched me before I even opened my eyes. I felt the warmth of Javier's body still beside me, his breath steady and calm. For a moment, I wished time would stop, but it didn't. He turned to me slowly and smiled, with that serene gaze that had embraced me since the very first day. "Good morning, Eleanor," I answered with a gentle kiss on his forehead. "Good morning," I whispered, even though my chest was tight with something I couldn't quite name, but already recognized. It was goodbye. He had only booked 3 days, and this was the last one. We had breakfast in silence, but not the kind that comes from a lack of things to say. It was the silence of people trying not to break something fragile and beautiful. Javier held my hand across the table as if to say, "I wish we had more time too," and I, with tears quietly building in my eyes, squeezed his fingers in return. I know. When he went to his room to pack, I walked into the garden. The lavender swayed in the wind, and I remembered our first coffee on the porch, the way he looked at me that day. Not just seeing a woman, but a whole world I had stopped looking at with kindness. I stepped back inside and found Javier standing in the living room doorway, suitcase in hand, eyes fixed on me. "Eleanor, I wasn't prepared for this," he said. "Neither was I replied. "But maybe that's what made it so beautiful." He stepped closer and held me in a long, quiet embrace that held everything we hadn't found the words to say. And when he pulled away, his eyes brighter than usual, he whispered, "You were home, and you'll still be, even when I'm gone." That was the moment I realized. Love isn't measured in months or in plans. Some loves arrive like a breeze and change us forever. Javier was with me for only 3 days, but in 3 days, he unraveled knots I had carried for decades. He showed me there was still space to feel, to be touched with tenderness, to desire, be desired. When he left, I stood at the door for a few minutes, watching the car slowly roll down the cobblestone street. I didn't cry. There was pain, yes, but it was a pain filled with gratitude. I walked back inside and sat on the couch, where his scent still lingered in the air. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and thought. It was brief, but it was whole. And in that moment, I understood something only time can truly teach. Sometimes, love doesn't come to stay. It comes to awaken. When it does, even if just for a few days, it leaves marks so deep, they stay with us, forever. After Javier left, the days seemed to move more slowly through the house. The guest house settled back into its routine. The sheets were changed. The curtains kept dancing in the wind. But something in me had changed for good. He was only here for 3 days, but it was enough to remind me of who I was, and even more, of who I could still become. No, I didn't go back to waiting for love as if expecting a miracle. But I learned that love can knock at your door when you least expect it. And sometimes, it doesn't arrive with promises. It arrives with presence. It may come disguised as a guest, carrying a small suitcase and eyes that see more than what's on the surface. And when it arrives like that, quietly, it leaves the deepest marks. "You were home," he told me at the goodbye. And those words stayed with me like a melody that echoes on silent days. I was home, but for the first time in many years, I also felt like home again. The kind of home where you don't have to hide old pain, where the marks of time are seen as maps, not flaws. After him, I began doing things with more intention. The flowers on the porch were watered more gently, the recipes in the kitchen carried more flavor, and the way I looked at myself in the mirror became less harsh. Because I understood, age doesn't erase desire, it simply transforms it into something more sensitive, more complete, more true. Women of my generation were taught to care, to wait, to silence certain longings. But mature love frees us from that. It doesn't ask for permission. It invites. It doesn't demand youth. It demands truth. And above all, it allows us to live with courage. Some of my friends asked me, "Eleanor, wasn't it too painful to live something so intense and then watch it end?" And I answered with a smile, yes, it was. But more painful would have been never living it at all. Today, sitting on the porch with my coffee, I look out at the street like someone who is waiting and not waiting at the same time. Not for Javier, but for myself. Because now I know love can return again and again in different forms, through different people, or even from within us. If you're listening to me and you're over 50, 60, 70, know this. It's never too late for your heart to race. It's never too late to be moved by a touch, by a quiet conversation at the window, by a glance that says more than 1,000 words. It's never too late to allow yourself, because sometimes all we really need is to leave the door slightly open, not for chance, but for life. And if one day life brings you an unexpected love, remember, it may last only a short while, it may promise nothing, and yet it can still change you forever, just like Javier changed me, just like love still changes me. If this story touched your heart in any way, then don't leave in silence. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this with someone who also needs to believe that love can be reborn at any time. Because when you do that, you help these stories find other lonely hearts. And maybe, without even knowing it, you awaken a brand new beginning in someone's life.